Okay, so over this series of videos we've been discussing various different ways of doing painting, and it's all pretty basic stuff, and a lot of it comes with practice. As you work your way through, you get more used to using an airbrush, different techniques that suit you better than anybody else, because that's it, it's all personal individual choices. So when we've gone through, we've done basic colouring and bleaching and things like that, like in the Harrier. We talked about camos and how the best ways of doing that, and obviously with the hard and soft edges, right the way up to gloss work and varnishing, stuff like that. Big thing is though, is when you move on to metals, right, or new metal finishes as it's commonly known. Now this is where we're talking about high-speed aluminium type things, early sort of jets when they're in those nice classic metal things. So we start really with things like the Mustang. And we've done videos on Mustangs and different ways of painting them over the years here at Flory Models, right the way through, you know, using alclads in the early days to buffable paints quite recently with the Tamiya kit. But it's quite an art form of using them. So what I want to do for a few moments is just give you a run through on my advice, if you like, on the different types of paint to actually use. Now, you've obviously got your traditional paint colours in your range. Okay, so you've got things like here we've got a bottle of Tamiya XF16, which is aluminium. And for many, many years as a younger modeler, I used to use this stuff and used to put it down. I had no problem with it at all. Trouble with it was it wasn't quite in scale. Okay, when I'm saying in scale, you could see the fleck. All these metallic paints have a sort of fleck to it in the paint. And then obviously new companies came along and they brought out things like we've got the chrome silver here, but it's still the same thing. It doesn't have that realistic looking metal, okay? And the trouble with it is it's all one colour, and obviously as we all know, when you look at metal finished aircraft and any type of thing really, even if you're doing a car in metals, the different shades, the light catches it differently. So these tend to be very sort of mono in the way they are. The fleck isn't very convincing because you can actually see the pattern in it. It looks like a metallic painted car rather than a polished metal surface. So whilst they have their place in the hobby for doing hand painting, things like that, I wouldn't recommend using these types of paints to paint your model, okay? What I would suggest is to moving on to something that's a little bit more specific. Now, if you're going along with the acrylic sort of line of things and with the smell and stuff like that, I would recommend the Games Workshop series of paints, the Citadel colours. Okay, this particular one is Mithril Silver. They've all got these weird and wacky names, okay? So you get like chainmail, stuff like that. The fleck count in them is absolutely superb. They're designed for hand painting, to be honest, but they go equally well through an airbrush. You need quite a lot of thinner to make them work nicely, but they give a stunning finish. And I've seen guys do anything up to 1/32 lightning, British lightnings in this stuff, and they look absolutely stunning. But again, it's very limited because it's quite a monotone block look to it. You can't change the shades as much as perhaps you would like to. But if you're going to do it, I'd recommend the Citadel range of paints. Pop down your local Games Workshop, you'll see all the weird and wacky names for them. They all are pretty good. And if you're hand painting them, they go down absolutely beautiful. So I would highly recommend those. What you really need if you're going to be doing any type of painting like this is the more harsher stuff, or the hot paints as I call them. So what we're actually talking about here is lacquer based paints or enamel paints. They seem to get the pigment more spot on, you don't get the flecky type of look to it, and it seems to give a more sort of tonal finish to it. So in the early days you can do things like alclad was always my paint of choice. It's very, very thin, you spray it direct from the airbrush, straight in, as you can probably see it here. It is like, you know, you've got little steel ball bearing going around in there. To be honest, really, really good stuff to use. Slight drawback to it is, one, it stinks to high heaven. Trust me, you can fill an entire house, even with my spray booth, which as we know, you know, isn't a cheap one back there. It will still smell the house out with this stuff. It's one of those things, your partner comes back and she will tell you you've been spraying this stuff even if you did it 12 hours ago. It lingers, okay? It does give a stunning finish, but it's at a price. It is such a thin paint that it's more like plating. It's a bit like chrome plating things. So i.e. if you've got any imperfections whatsoever on the surface of your model, be it a sink mark, a sanding mark, a fingerprint, something else like that, it will show it and it will magnify it 100 times. So you do need to be pretty spot on with your finishes, which is something we covered when we were talking about glosses and things like that, how you need them to be spot on, otherwise everything just gets magnified 100 times. So pretty good stuff. Good colour range as well. They tend to do lots of aircraft related colours and things like that. And certainly, even as 2 years ago, it was my paint of choice, if I'm honest. Now, I must admit, I prefer these two. So what we've got down here is they are enamel based paints. This is Model Masters stuff. It's buffable, okay, and this is the big difference. We've also got down here the Mr. Metal Colour range, okay, which is by Gunsanyo. Again, buffable paints. The thing with these two paints is they're not as smelly. Certainly not as fragile because they paint down instead of plating. So, you know, whereas with the Alclad you have to be careful how you handle it, things like that. I'm certainly masking over it. Okay, these are a lot more hard wearing. These are just like putting down your standard enamel paints or acrylic paints. They work roughly the same way. To be honest, the metallizer one that is actually for the Model Master, you have to be a little bit careful because they do have two brands. Some of them are buffable, some of them aren't. You really want the buffable type because that way you can change the metal tones in the paintwork and give it that more three-dimensional look to it all. Their labelling is absolutely useless because it doesn't actually say for here in the UK, and I happen to have the American version. This is the bottle here, which is the American versus the UK. As you can see, straight the way down here, it says for airbrushing only, so you can't hand paint it. Alright, but it says here buffing metallizer. This one here just says stainless steel. Okay, and then when you look around it, it doesn't mention anything about buffing whatsoever. It just happens to be that when you know the numbers, you'll know the ones which are buffable and the ones that are not. So it's just a case of going through them all and finding the ones that actually are. I'll just grab another one down here. But as I say, you look at the front and it says here paint for metallizers, but it again doesn't say anything down here, but we know that the 431 is a buffable one. And it's just one of those things, check your references. A lot of people got caught out in the early days and you buy the wrong one, and although it's great and works just like Alclad, you can't actually buff it, which is something we're going to cover in a moment. The gun stuff, to be honest, this stuff is my paint of choice. It is absolutely fantastic. I've been using it now for the last couple of years and I am completely sold on it. It is as hard as nails. This stuff is almost impossible to get off your model when it's on there, and you can buff it to an inch of its life and get it like a mirror and you won't go through it. And that's the beautiful thing with it. It's very, very hard wearing. Great stuff to use. Again, sometimes a little bit problematic getting hold of it, but at least their numbers are pretty much spot on. You know that this is number 218 and it's aluminium and it's Mr. Metal Colour and all the Mr. Metal Colour range, and we've got them all just up here. They are all buffables, and you've got weird and wacky colours. So you've got like bronze greens, we've got irons, we've got dark irons, chrome silver, stainless steel, things like that. And they go from a colour range of being black and then you buff them up into a silver. They will go that far. So they're absolutely lovely. When you're painting all basically metal colours, you need a good base down for them. So we spoke about it with priming and stuff like that. What you're going to need is a satin at the minimum, okay, finish for it. You can't really go over flats because you're gonna, you know, it doesn't work that well. So a satin like I've got here or a gloss works really, really well, and you want to go over black. Black works like a mirror then because it reflects the pigment underneath all up. So it gives you a deep, good looking metal finish. If you go over any other colour, it just tends to lose that little bit and you need to put down a lot more paint than perhaps you normally would. And really, that is it. It is that simple. So what we're going to do now is have a rundown of using the paint, how it works, and certainly with the buffing and everything else like that. So the first thing you need to do if you're doing something like this is find a way of holding on to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that one in there. Okay, now you recommend that you use this in a very well ventilated area because it is enamels, but again, because of the problem of wanting to show you guys exactly what I'm doing, I'm sort of forced to do it this way and do it here rather than the spray booth, because although the spray booth is where all my stuff gets done, certainly here when we want to show you, we need it to be good. Now the paint's very, very thin, okay, so you know what you want to do is basically you're not going to need thinners or anything else like that, but what you are going to need for cleanup and going through, if you've just got exclusively of enamels, is either enamel or a lacquer based thinner for obviously clean up and stuff like that, because if you haven't got it, you put it through your airbrush, and trust me, I know guys who've done this and then they've got nothing to clean it out with, then it goes rock hard in your airbrush. So just make sure if you are using it for the first time, you have got something that will clean out your airbrush. Obviously acrylic airbrush cleaner isn't going to do it. So what we will do is we will, seeing as it's already been plugged in, we're going to first of all take a few drops, and to be honest this is pretty horrible in here. I'm just going to put in a few drops of my old thinners in here. Got a cotton bud. I'm just wiping it around the inside of my colour cup and everything all round it. Now, as I say, it's one of those things, don't do as I do sometimes. I don't recommend using cotton buds, because the trouble is what can happen is that they can drop fibres, which cause it. Just pumped it a couple of times, as you saw, into the area. Okay, what that's done now is get rid of all the water-based stuff. So because we've been using through this particular airbrush lots and lots of acrylics, I needed it to line it with something a little bit harsher, so when it comes in it doesn't have a trouble and doesn't have separating and things like that. So for this little demo, I'm going to see what we've got in these little cups. So I'm just trying to work out what we've got a lot of. Tell you what we'll do a chrome silver. I was going to do aluminium, but we'll show you what you can get away with this stuff. Now, the other thing you need to do is move anything that is you don't want metallic in your area, especially here. I've got my models down here, and what I'm going to do is just put them over there for a minute and push them out the way, and I'm going to cover them up because you will get overspray everywhere. Metallics, it's one of those things, you'll run your finger around your room and you will get metallic dust. So just take a few moments just to cover absolutely everything you don't want to turn silver. So first thing to do, air pressure right down. Okay, I know I've got like a little Mac valve. I'm taking this down to around about, I'm guessing it's around about 12 psi. Okay, because it's quite thin, you don't want to do it. Again, using the old trick of looking at the bottom to see exactly what you've got. So have a look down at the bottom of your colour cup of your bottle, and you'll see the pigment sort of rolling around all in there. How well the camera picks up, but I can see the drip running on the inside, so I know it's thoroughly mixed, because what can happen, obviously the pigment can settle right down the bottom. So it is pretty thin stuff. So what I'm going to do is just going to pop it into here. You'll notice it runs down everywhere. Pop your lid on as well, this stuff dries really, really quick. Okay, checking our flow there. Alright, and then what we're going to do is just going to come in and spray this on. So it's just going to start on a wing, and we're just going to literally put down a light coat, coming back on it, and you can see it covers absolutely beautifully. But this is it, it's very thin, so it will show any imperfections you've got. So all those nasty seam lines you thought that nobody would notice, they will do when you're doing this. Okay, so you're just literally popping it round. Make sure you do leading edges and trailing edges, because they're all little areas that can be overlooked. But what you want to do is layer it up. Don't go in there too thick. Okay, and just keep it quite light and dusty, and you can obviously overcoat as many times as you like. Just try and keep it quite even. And obviously the other big thing is don't touch it. Okay, so we're just out of that colour cut, so I'm just using it up, to be honest. Okay, and there you have it. Very straightforward, very nice. Now, if you're using traditional paints, okay, so if you're just using a non-buffing variety, that is the effect you'll get. No problem at all. Looks really, really nice. Okay, you want to give it a couple of hours to go off. Don't touch it in any way, okay? And then what you're going to need to do is seal it down, which is something we'll move on to in a moment. But this little one has a trick up its sleeve because it is buffable. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, to be honest, is turn on the extractor, get most of this horrible stuff that's flying around and the smells out of the studio. Okay, let this dry off for around about half an hour. Going to come back and I'm going to show you how good this stuff is, and we're going to buff it up. Okay, so it's been about half an hour, and now you've successfully covered your entire place in silver dust, okay? You can think about what to do with it. Now, traditionally, if you were saying before, just using a normal, a non-buffing metallic paint, you know, you would think about sealing it, things like that. But from our point of view, what we want to do now is actually work on it a little bit and show you what this stuff can do. Now, if you haven't got any, I would advise wearing gloves, purely because you can leave fingerprints in these. So by popping these on, it'll just stop you accidentally putting a fingerprint in it and buffing the wrong place. Now, you can buff with traditional paper towel, which we'll show you, okay? But what you want to do is loosen it all up a little bit first, get it quite soft, because the softer you use on this, the better it is, okay? So what we're going to do now, I'm just going to pop it down. And we'll just bring the side cam in just a little bit closer so you can see what we're up to here. So what we've got, we'll just do this little wing here, okay? So if you give it a rub with your finger, you will notice you will slightly make it a bit shiny, but if you look on my finger, I've got plenty of silver on here now, which is what you get covered in. So if you use a cloth and lightly give it a buff, you can just go along, just lightly rub. You can actually start to get quite a hefty shine on this, because what you're doing is the dust that's on here, you're sort of rubbing it in and making the pigment sort of work, and you'll notice you'll start to polish, it will get smoother. And just like polishing your car or something else like that, as it gets smoother, it all gets a little bit easier. Okay, you just keep going at it and rubbing and rubbing and rubbing. Okay, and you'll notice you can rub quite hard and you're not going to rub through, but you might be able to see now that that wing tip, if we take these out, okay, this wing tip here is completely changed now and is looking, hopefully, the camera hates silver things, you might notice, but you might notice it's looking really very different to the rest of it. Now, basically, I would recommend using a soft cloth, because a soft cloth works so much better. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll find a clean bit. This black you can see all over this, to be honest, is where I've buffed other things with it. So for instance, if you're a long-term member, you'll know we did the Mustang with this. So we're just going to take our little area and we're just going to do one entire half, and you'll see the difference between the two. Okay, so we're just going to do this entire wing section, but you can actually give it quite a lot of stick. You know, you can buff this, and as you can see, it's all pretty black, but you can buff this extremely hard, where obviously you can't do this if you were, you know, using alclads or something else equally as metally, you know. But what we do, we're just gonna pop along. But obviously the softer your cloth, the better the finish you'll get. But if you're looking at it and you're thinking a little bit, you know, stipply, keep buffing at it and you can actually polish it all out very, very smooth. So if I just do this entire side, and there we go, when you put it under the camera, hopefully you can see this stuff's nice and shiny versus the other side isn't too much at all. Okay, so then you can start picking up the pace with it a little bit. If we do the front nose here, okay, we're just gonna go in and keep buffing at it. Okay, and it is this thing, the more you buff, you can actually get this like a mirror, which is amazing. And this is why I fell in love with this stuff, because it is so durable. I think I've only ever buffed through it once in my life, but if you look at the nose there now, it's got such a deep glossy sort of look to it, and also it has that real nice, you know, sort of authentic metal look, because you don't get that sort of pigmenty thing to it all. So what we're going to do, we're just going to whip over the entire model. Okay, but the secret is to keep buffing it all in and rubbing at it. Okay, don't keep turning your cloth either. It sounds really weird because it sounds like you're going against sort of nature when you think you should be churning your cloth, but this black stuff is what's actually making it all shine up. Okay, so as you say, you just keep buffing at it and going round, and you just buff it all in. Now, depending where you buff will depend on how much finish you get. So if you just pick out individual panels and give them a good rub, you can change the shade quite considerably versus another area perhaps you want it to be a little bit duller. Now, to be honest, this is just the chrome, so there isn't a great deal of variation in it, but when you're dealing with a colour such as the irons, the dark irons, the stainless steels, because they are quite different colours from when they're being polished and when they're not, that you can really do various things with them. So for instance, you know, thinking about it, what have I done? An engine is a little gem that I've done on the Mustang and on the Spitfire, because the great thing about those is that when you put it first down, it's black, and then you just go along and you give it a buff up and you can make it silver, so you can actually naturally highlight and worn areas and all things like that. Okay, so we're just going to go down in here. Okay. But the beauty is, what you can do is go along now, put this down, polish all this up. Now if you wanted to go for a full-on, you know, fantastic chrome look to this, you would give it another coat now. Okay, so you get it all off, polished up, you've got a beautiful smooth finish underneath. Okay, and then just go along and give it another go with another coat of metallizer over the top of it. This back here, to be honest, I never did glue it, so we're just going to do it as a separate. Okay, but you can pop it in here and you give it a good old rub. But this is where metallizer, as far as I'm concerned, suddenly came of age, and they sort of went from being a problem thing to use to being actually something really very nice that you can go along and, you know, get amazing effects with, and different variations in metal shades and stuff. So he says try not to break the PTO tube off there. But the only downside to using them is, one is obviously you're getting covered in silver, and you need to stop that, because otherwise when you come onto things like decaling and, you know, all these things like that, but you know, obviously you don't want to get metal flecks and polishy bits all over your decals, and perhaps you might go along and then do other colour schemes on top, so you might be putting flats on top or drabs and things like that. You know, you don't want those to get particularly horribly covered in silver dust, so you need to seal it in, and that's what we're going to do next. So what I'm going to do is pop this back together. Okay, wrong way up, but never mind. Okay, but there we go. That's our very nice, very shiny, very easily done, on both cameras, little vampire, just done like that. So what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to spend a couple more minutes just running around it, just polishing it up and everything else like that, and then I'm going to show you about sealing down. Okay, so been around it all everywhere, looking really, really nice, as you can see. So what we need to do now is seal it in. Now, we spoke about glossing in other videos, which you can see works roughly the same way, apart from this one is specifically designed for metallizer paints. Now, you could put this on with a brush, okay? Thing you need to remember is don't panic, because what will happen is it will look like it's all gone streaky and horrible, because the pigment that we were saying is on this surface, which continues to come off for months afterwards, will streak with it, and you think, ah, it's gone horribly wrong. But then what happens is, as it dries, it sort of self-levels back, so don't panic sort of too much with it. Now, if you were to use a normal gloss or something else like this on here, what can happen is you can actually change the metal look to the paintwork. It changes. For instance, if you'd been using an Alclad and you try and come over it with clear or a gloss, it goes like satin. It's never exactly brilliant. This stuff actually, although looks bad at the time, and trust me, it will, you'll see it in a moment, give it time, come back 10 minutes later, it's absolutely fine. It's totally dry in 30 minutes as well, so it works on our side of things for keeping things moving along. So we're going to spray it exactly as we would the metallizer. So we'll just unscrew the top here. Okay, so this is Model Master Metallizer Sealer, so it is designed for theirs, but it will work with anyone's. Okay, so we just check our flow, same thing again, it's a little bit high, so we're going to turn it down. Okay, and then what you're going to do is just put down a coat, and you'll see it go on. And as I say, it changes slightly, and you tend to think, oh god, it's going horrendously wrong and it's going to change, and then actually it comes back, so don't panic too much. Okay, so we just pop this down, just change the air pressure up just a little bit. Okay, and just put down quite a generous thick coat, but you might see it changes. As I say, don't panic too much, it will come back. Up the air pressure. Okay, and on the bottom. Because what you can do, which is quite nice, is obviously you can polish this as well, and then obviously you can go over it if you like with hand painting it afterwards. So what this will do is lock down this nice metal look to everything. Okay. Just like so. Okay, so what we're going to do then, we're just going to literally leave this for around about half an hour to totally go off. Okay, once it's completely gone off, we can come back. We're going to give it another quick polish over with a clean cloth, bring back some of that nice luster and see exactly what we got. Okay, and there we go, looking very, very nice, as you can see. Silver's always a problem with the cameras, but hopefully you can get a rough gist of what's going on with it. And the great thing is, it's totally handleable. If you didn't put the a sealer on top or anything, you would get covered, because this stuff continues to give and give and give, trust me, for a long, long time. But I must admit, you know, simple advice, get a bottle of this stuff. It's a Model Master sealer for metallizer. It's the only one I know which, when you spray it on, doesn't change the luster of the metal, shall we say, because sometimes it can go almost from, you know, you get a nice stainless steel effect and it just goes like iron, you know, things like that. This stuff works really, really well. And then what you can do is, obviously you can overcoat now. So if you wanted to, you could say, okay, well now I've got the base colour down absolutely everywhere, I'm going to go around and I can mask up over the top of it and do a different panel, a different colour. So then you would mask it, put it over. Now if you didn't put a sealer down and you masked it, when you pulled off the tape, you'll be left with horrible marks of glue marks and where it's peeled off the actual silver and all things like that. So it just makes it really, really nice. Same with deckling as well. Deckling now isn't a chore, really, really simple. Yet to be honest, until this stuff came along, you know, in the last year, before then the only way you could do it was to actually overcoat with, you know, a normal gloss, something else like that, and you just slightly change your colour. So I do recommend that stuff, but as you say, it's not too bad using the silvers. Just take your time with it. You'll find from an airbrushing point of view, it's probably the easiest stuff you're ever going to airbrush, because quite frankly, it's straight from the bottle, it's very, very thin, and you just spray it. Just remember, keep your airbrush below 15, okay? Light coats and build up gently with it. Don't try and flood it down, just to say light misty coats all over it, but you'll find it will cover extremely quickly, which is the nice thing about this stuff. So there we go, that's easy metalwork. And there we go, that's it. I hope in these short series of videos that we've done that we've sort of explained a lot of it. The thing is with all airbrushing, it's practice, 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 practice. You know, some guys pick it up really easy, some guys find it a little bit hard. Everybody has their own little tweak on it. Nobody can tell you you need to spray at, you know, 18 psi at a mixture ratio of A, B and C and you know, and this distance away, because it won't work. The thing is with all airbrushing is it's very dependent on the conditions you're spraying in. So for instance, if you're in a very hot, humid country, okay, and you know, something like that, you might find that your paint, it takes longer to dry than it would be if you're in somewhere with a very sort of dry, with no humidity type of thing, because obviously it's drying so quickly. So you need to slightly adjust your balances, okay? And this is where the variable of airbrushing comes in, because there's no chart you can use, and nobody can teach you exactly how to do, because your environment you're in, it's just so many dependent things. It's temperature, humidity play a massive role into it. And then, as you say, it depends on things like your airbrush, your needle size you're using, and various other things. It's just the case of use the basics that we've showed you on this one for putting down lighter coats, things like that. Few little things. Okay, if you're spraying and it's just very wet all the time, okay, try upping your air pressure a little bit, thickening your paint, all right? If you find you've got really rough texture on your model and you're looking at these and thinking, well, mine aren't as smooth, and that's really, really rough, okay? Try a little bit more thinners and try lowering your air pressure, and you'll find that it takes a little bit longer to dry, but you'll have no problems with it. Also, the thing is, if you're quite rough, move a little bit closer, because there's slight variables to it, as in if you're spraying something like a hawk down here and you've got this edge, okay, this edge here causes a vortex ring. When you're spraying down and you're spraying on the side, the edge flex, hits the wing and sort of does a spin like this, and it drags that air around. What happens is all those particles that have been atomized are dry in there, and then they stick to each other and it goes like sandpaper. Sometimes though, it can't be avoided. You know, I have it all the time. So what you have to do, literally come along, grab yourself a polishing stick, something else like that, give it a little bit of a rub, clean it off, a little bit of airbrush cleaner on a cloth, take those off and you'll be absolutely fine with it. We've got a video on here as well, which is actually about some of the troubleshooting and things like that. Just things like on your airbrush when it's not working, and some things to look out for, so it might be interesting to do. But a lot of this stuff is practice, 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 okay? Taking your time. Watch some of our other videos. There's a couple of videos here on the DVD, and members, you'll know them on the site anyway, of part of full builds. When I do the entire thing from start to finish and I cover all the paintwork, when I come across things, I do tend to sort of shout about it and bring it out. But on the DVD, I've also included a couple of actual ones on painting kits as I've just built them, gone the way through, because they're quite interesting. Some of them are a little bit older, but it covers things, a bit like the MiG-29. You've seen it on other videos before, but it is a very good tutorial one to learn from. And is so doing the Seafire as well, which again is from an older DVD, but I've brought it in with this one to sort of go along with these new ones and everything else, because they really are good. So if you've seen them before, apologies. If you haven't, well worth having a look at. I hope you found it all useful and everything else. Don't forget, if you're a member of Flory Models, pop onto the forum. We've got a full section on airbrushing, and we've got a community there who will jump on anything to help you out wherever they can. Obviously, you can get hold of me direct as well. Just get me through the site, through Flory Models, or you can PM me directly through Facebook and various things like that as well. So there we go. I hope that sort of dispelled some of the myths about airbrushing, and hopefully you'll be turning out some lovely work very, very soon.